Thank you, Philip. So my plan is to talk about the changing energy market and how Statkraft responds to it. I'm a bit of an energy nerd, and last time I spoke about this, I spent 45 minutes, so I will now try to do it in 7. Let's see if we can make that work. I'm also aware that this is a branding conference, and then being an energy nerd, I will try to at least mention branding a couple of times during my talk. I will not bore you with a lot of statistics about Statkraft, but just remind you that we are the largest generator of renewable energy in Europe, with around 19 gigawatts installed capacity globally. We generate hydropower, wind power, solar power, and we operate in around 12 countries in Europe, South America, and India. And in addition, which is much less known, we're the largest, what we call integrator of renewable energy in Europe, which means that we take the production from typically smaller third-party producers to the market with roughly 20 gigawatts of such capacity globally. So actually more than what we produce ourselves. So my job and my team's job is to try to analyze the global energy picture, but then also a detailed analysis of the countries that we operate in the long term, and I will share some of our thoughts. So The Economist had this fantastic cover, many of you have seen it already, and it was published 5 years ago, signaling the death or the end of the traditional utility business model. At approximately the same time, the then CEO of RWE said, "We have no business model." So the imagery here, of course, is fantastic with the gray and the green and the two incompatible plugs. And the development we've seen over the last few years has continued along this path. We've seen share values plummeting, tens of thousands of jobs lost, and large restructuring of companies taking place. So a natural question could be to ask, have we reached the bottom? Is this it? Are we now done? In my view, and in our view, the answer is no. So I will talk you through 2 of the key trends going forward, and then touch on our response to those trends. So the first trend is the Renewables Revolution. It is, common knowledge, hopefully, to everyone in this room, that the prices for wind and solar are plummeting, and that the growth is exponential. But just to illustrate the speed, there's around 400 gigawatts of solar installed in the world today. Almost everything been built over the last 10 to 12 years. The next 400 will be built in less than 4 years, and will cost less than a third of the first 400. And this is, a symbol of exponential growth. According to our projections, this acceleration will continue beyond those 4 years. And if it was only cost, the renewable generation that is growing is solar and wind, which I talked about, and that is a different game to the classical power generation. To the left here, you can see the dam we're building in Moglice in Albania. This is a huge project. You can see the excavators up there in the mountainside. There's even a laser pointer. There you go, excavator. It is a massive project, hundreds, if not thousands of people on site. And they're constructing what will be the world's largest asphalt core dam. You can see the spillway up there. Right? The dam, which is here, will go all the way up there eventually. Now, to the right is Statkraft's site presence for a solar power project. And his name is Bart. That is it. He's standing in the door of the trailer that houses his office, and on site he would be accompanied by 1 or 2 more guys from some contractors. The difference in complexity between that and that is staggering. We estimate roughly 5 years construction time in Albania. It took us less than 1 year to build the solar power park in the Netherlands. We actually started developing the solar power after we started building in Albania, and we finished it before we finished the building in Albania. The cost of the hydropower development is more than 500 million euros. Cost of the solar park less than 10. So you see that solar and also wind are much, much simpler projects, where each individual project is much less expensive. The consequence of that is that the classical competitive advantages of being able to manage large projects, take on large construction risk, diminishes in value in the solar and wind world. You no longer need the best engineers, you rather need the best project developers, business developers, financiers, even traders, marketers. It is a different game. So solar and wind will in fact take over the world and change the world. I think it's impossible to overestimate the importance it will have. As I said, we do extensive modeling of the energy world, of the power markets where we operate, and our modeling shows that renewable electricity used to electrify buildings, transport, and industry will solve the climate challenge. The question is whether it happens fast enough to limit the temperature increase to 2 degrees or even less. You can think of decarbonizing an economy as a book in 2 chapters. Chapter 1, you decarbonize your electricity sector through renewables. Chapter 2, you use that renewable electricity to electrify everything else and thus decarbonizing it. And well, since I've started name dropping of our employees, this is Matthias, and this is a Swedish forest, by the way. All right, so what is this? Well, this illustrates the second trend I want to cover. This image is from the aluminium smelter in Sunndal in Norway. The owner of this is Norsk Hydro. And by the way, they consume more power than the entire country of Iceland, roughly 50% more, I think. In the last few years, Norsk Hydro has been one of the largest buyers of renewable energy in the world, through a series of contracts with wind power projects in Norway and in Sweden. They're symbolic of a new trend of companies that care about where their electricity comes from. That is in fact renewable, the so-called corporate PPA trend. So while the magnitude and breadth of this is new, the trend itself is not so new. The Sunndal smelter was built simultaneously with our power plant right next door in the late 40s and 50s. And a 50-year contract was entered into to secure the supply to the smelter and the offtake from the power plant. What I think is more new is that these customers that historically didn't really care about where the electricity comes from, now cares that it is renewable and that it is not based on wind or solar. And it's even more valid for companies with consumer brands. They need to make these commitments stick, right? If they were to be caught lying, this would be the worst case scenario for them, as they would then lose the brand trust that they have. The fact that renewables are becoming the cheapest option in many countries further accelerates this trend. Then 1 minute on what we're doing about the changes in the energy market. So we've just revised our strategy. We believe that our core competence is to really understand the markets we're in, not just theoretically, but practically through our physical presence, our trading operations. And in those markets, we will invest significant money in renewables, developing our existing hydropower portfolio, but really stepping up our game in terms of developing new solar and wind projects. As part of what we call a market-centric approach, we'll focus on supplying larger business customers in those markets, deliver power to them according to their needs, but also then backing it up with our flexibility in terms of hydropower and batteries. Statkraft will, with that, position ourselves in the center of the energy transition. And not only is that exciting from a business perspective, but it is also almost too good to be true in terms of positioning and branding the company. Thank you.